The FBI Director James Comey will not be, the former FBI Director, I should say, will not be prosecuted over his handling of the memos that the FBI later determined contained classified information. Despite a referral from the Justice Department's Inspector General, DOJ prosecutors declined to prosecute Comey, in part because they didn't believe there was evidence he intended to violate laws on handling of classified information. So let's discuss now. With CNN national security analyst James Clapper, he is the former Director of National Intelligence. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Clapper, Director Clapper, for joining us. James Comey's not going to be prosecuted. That will disappoint the president. What's your reaction?
Well, I agree. It will disappoint him and other critics of Jim Comey. I think it was, though, the right decision on for two reasons, both in the interest of fairness and as well more practical. I'm quite sure, I never saw the memos in question, but I'm quite sure that Jim, in his own mind, took great care to ensure that there was not classified information. And I'm told that what I understand is that retroactively the FBI classified one of them as confidential, which is a pretty low bar for classification. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious what their rationale was for saying that one memo was classified. So anyway, I think justice was served here by refusing to prosecute. I think actually they'd have a hard time making a case before a judge.
Yeah. You know, the president was asked about ongoing Russian interference today, Director, and whether he brought it up to President Putin in his phone call yesterday. Watch this.
Mr. President, Robert Mueller said last week that Russia is interfering in U.S. elections right now. Raised that with Vladimir Putin.
You don't really believe this. Do you believe this now? Okay. Okay.
Raised that with
Fine.
President Putin yesterday.
We didn't talk about that.
Mueller said right now he believes Russia is interfering in the election.
Well, I watched Mueller. I'm not sure Mueller knows what's going on.
So how is the U.S. going to stop Russia from interfering in our election if the president won't admit it's even happening?
Well, that's what has concerned me for many months now, because of the president's refusal, for whatever reason, to acknowledge the magnitude of the Russian interference. And I think a lot has probably been done to enhance our security, but the problem is, in the absence of the bully pulpit that only the president can speak from, there is not this galvanizing effect to warn the American electorate of what the Russians, and now I think others, will emulate the Russians to interfere in our election process for 2020. So, you know, the president's response was very consistent with the last time he was with Putin and just kind of mockingly, jokingly made a joke of it. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't take it seriously. And I think the reason is, it goes back to when we briefed the then president-elect on January 6th of 2017, in which he just couldn't get his head around it or refused to accept the evidence that we presented because it cast doubt on the legitimacy of his election. I think he's been very consistent about that ever since.
Well, here's what he says. He claims the phone call was mostly about forest fires in Siberia. What do you suppose that means?
Well, what struck me is what he didn't talk about. For example, the demise of the INF treaty tomorrow, the intermediate ballistic missile treaty that's been a pillar of Cold War arms control agreement for decades, nor did he bring up potential extension of the New START, the strategic arms reduction treaty. And so to me, these would be serious issues that the two of them should discuss, rather than the forest fire thing, which was, I think, a buddy-up gesture. But there's for reasons of sovereignty, pride, and security, the Russians would never accept an offer like that anyway. Mm-hmm. And as for trade, I don't know. I thought we were sanctioning Russians, so it was very difficult to trade with them. So, again, I think the most important thing here is what is the significance of the call is what they didn't discuss.
Director, I want to switch gears now to President Trump's nomination of Congressman John Ratcliffe, a member of the House Intelligence Committee for the Office of Director of National Intelligence, your former job. This is what the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said about that nomination. Watch this.
This is about war and peace. If we don't have a DNI who speaks truth to power, who first is able to cull the facts and come up with an unbiased view of what they say, and in an unvarnished way can tell the president, we're in a much more dangerous world than they would have been. I could hardly think of a worse choice than him, padding resume or not.
So I want to get your thoughts. Are you concerned that Ratcliffe wouldn't speak truth to President Trump and that he'd be just another yes man?
Well, yes. Now, I say this because I don't know Congressman Ratcliffe. I'd never heard of him until his attack dog performance during the Mueller hearing. Mm-hmm. And it's clear, I mean, the law stipulates that the DNI is supposed to be someone who has extensive expertise in national security. And by practice, that's been the case with Dan Coats and all of his predecessors. I will tell you, I had spent 50 years in intelligence and run a couple of agencies for almost 9 years. Mm-hmm. And being DNI was the hardest thing I ever tried to do. And it's a difficult job if you know something about intelligence. And if you don't, it's virtually impossible. Now, that all said, that's not why the president selected him. He sort of did an apprentice-like audition, I guess, for the hearing.
During the hearing. Yeah, listen, I've got to run, but I just want to say, and Garrett Graff pointed this out, and he says, before becoming DNI, James Clapper had worked in U.S. intelligence for nearly 50 years and personally headed 2 of the nation's 17 intel agencies. By comparison, John Ratcliffe was the mayor of Heath, Texas, population 8,000. Thank you, Director. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Don.